Say you use vibe coding to do something, and you go to some place, and then you get a bug. And then you tell the model, can you please fix the bug?
Yeah.
And the model says, oh my God, you're so right, I have a bug, let me go fix that. And it introduces a second bug.
Yeah.
And then you tell it, you have this second bug.
Right.
And it tells you, oh my God, how could I have done it? You're so right again. And brings back the first bug.
Yeah.
And you can alternate between those.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is that possible? They are doing so well on evals.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the evals and you go, those are pretty hard evals.
Right.
They're doing so well. But the economic impact seems to be dramatically behind.
Yes.
Is the belief that if you just 100x the scale, everything would be transformed? I don't think that's true.
That was Ilya Sutskever, co-founder of OpenAI, chief scientist behind GPT-2, GPT-3, and GPT-4. The man many consider the most important researcher in the history of deep learning, and he just raised what might be the most important question in AI right now.
I think the models seem smarter than their economic impact would imply.
Yeah, this is one of the very confusing things about the models right now. How to reconcile the fact that they are doing so well on evals.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the evals and you go, those are pretty hard evals.
Right.
They're doing so well. But the economic impact seems to be dramatically behind.
Yes.
And it's almost like it's very difficult to make sense of how can the model on the one hand do these amazing things,
Yeah.
and then on the other hand, like repeat itself twice in some situation in a kind of an example would be, let's say you use vibe coding to do something and you go to some place and then you get a bug. And then you tell the model, can you please fix the bug?
Yeah.
And the model says, oh my God, you're so right, I have a bug, let me go fix that. And it introduces a second bug.
Yeah.
And then you tell it, you have this second bug.
Right.
And it tells you, oh my God, how could I have done it? You're so right again. And brings back the first bug.
Yeah.
And you can alternate between those.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not sure. But it does suggest that something strange is going on. I have two possible explanations. So here, this is the more kind of a whimsical explanation, is that maybe RL training makes the models a little bit too single-minded and narrowly focused, a little bit too, I don't know, unaware, even though it also makes them aware in some other ways. And because of this, they can't do basic things. But there is another explanation, which is back when people were doing pre-training, the question of what data to train on was answered because that answer was everything.
Yeah.
When you do pre-training, you need all the data. So you don't have to think, is it going to be this data or that data?
Yeah.
But when people do RL training, they do need to think. They say, okay, we want to have this kind of RL training for this thing and that kind of RL training for that thing. And from what I hear, all the companies have teams that just produce new RL environments and just add it to the training mix. And then the question is, well, what are those? There are so many degrees of freedom. There is such a huge variety of RL environments you could produce. And one thing you could do, and I think that's something that is done inadvertently, is that people take inspiration from the evals. You say, hey, I would love our model to do really well when we release it. I want the evals to look great. What would be RL training that could help on this task, right? I think that is something that happens, and I think it could explain a lot of what's going on. If you combine this with generalization of the models actually being inadequate, that has the potential to explain a lot of what we are seeing, this disconnect between eval performance and actual real world performance, which is something that we don't today exactly even understand what we mean by that.
I like this idea that the real reward hacking is the human researchers who are too focused on the evals. I think there's two ways to understand or to try to think about what you have just pointed out. One is, look, if it's the case that simply by becoming superhuman at a coding competition, a model will not automatically become more tasteful, and exercise better judgment about how to improve your code base. Well, then you should expand the suite of environments such that you're not just testing it on having the best performance in a coding competition. It should also be able to make the best kind of application for X thing or Y thing or Z thing. And another, maybe this is what you're hinting at, is to say, why should it be the case in the first place that becoming superhuman at coding competitions doesn't make you a more tasteful programmer more generally? Maybe the thing to do is not to keep stacking up the amount of environments and the diversity of environments to figure out an approach which lets you learn from one environment and improve your performance on something else.
So I have an analogy, a human analogy, which might be helpful. So even the case, let's take the case of competitive programming, since you mentioned that. And suppose you have two students. One of them decided they want to be the best competitive programmer, so they will practice 10,000 hours for that domain. Yeah. They will solve all the problems, memorize all the proof techniques, and be very, very, be very skilled at quickly and correctly implementing all the algorithms. And by doing so, they became the best, one of the best. Student number two thought, oh, competitive programming is cool. Maybe they practiced for 100 hours, much, much less, and they also did really well. Which one do you think is going to do better in their career later on?
The second.
Right? And I think that's basically what's going on. The models are much more like the first student, but even more, because then we say, okay, so the model should be good at competitive programming, so let's get every single competitive programming problem ever, and then let's do some data augmentation so we have even more competitive programming problems.
Yes.
And we train on that. And so now you got this great competitive programmer. And with this analogy, I think it's more intuitive. I think it's more intuitive with this analogy that, yeah, okay, so if it's so well trained, okay, it's like all the different algorithms and all the different proof techniques are like right at its fingertips. And it's more intuitive that with this level of preparation, it would not necessarily generalize to other things.
So the models ace the benchmarks, but fumble in the real world. That's the paradox. But Ilya thinks he knows why. For the last 5 years, the entire industry has been obsessed with one word: scaling. More data, more compute, more parameters. It worked until it didn't. And now Ilya believes we've entered a new era, one where the old playbook no longer applies.
So the way ML used to work is that people would just tinker with stuff and try to get interesting results. That's what's been going on in the past. Then the scaling insight arrived, right? Scaling laws, GPT-3. And suddenly everyone realized we should scale. And it's just this is an example of how language affects thought. Scaling is just one word, but it's such a powerful word because it informs people what to do. They say, okay, let's try to scale things. And so you say, okay, so what are we scaling? And pre-training was the thing to scale. It was a particular scaling recipe.
Yes.
The big breakthrough of pre-training is the realization that this recipe is good. So you say, hey, if you mix some compute with some data into a neural net of a certain size, you will get results. And you will know that it will be better if you just scale the recipe up. And this is also great. Companies love this because it gives you a very low-risk way of investing your resources.
Yeah.
Right? It's much harder to invest your resources in research. Compare that. If you research, you need to have go forth researchers and research and come up with something versus get more data, get more compute, you'll get something from pre-training. And indeed, it looks like based on various things some people say on Twitter, maybe it appears that Gemini have found a way to get more out of pre-training. At some point, though, pre-training will run out of data. The data is very clearly finite. And so then, okay, what do you do next? Either you do some kind of a souped up pre-training, different recipe from the one we've done before, or you're doing RL, or maybe something else. But now that compute is big, compute is now very big, in some sense, we are back to the age of research. So maybe here's another way to put it. Up until 2020, from 2012 to 2020, it was the age of research. Now, from 2020 to 2025, it was the age of scaling, or maybe plus minus. Let's add error bars to those years. Because people say, this is amazing, you got to scale more, keep scaling. The one word, scaling. But now the scale is so big, like, is the belief really that, oh, it's so big, but if you had 100x more, everything would be so different? Like, it would be different for sure. But like, is the belief that if you just 100x the scale, everything would be transformed? I don't think that's true. So it's back to the age of research again, just with big computers.
Back to the age of research. That's a striking claim from someone who helped prove that scaling works in the first place. But here's what makes it even more interesting. Ilya isn't just saying we need new ideas. He's pointing to a specific problem, a fundamental gap between how AI learns and how humans learn. We can train a model on more text than any human could read in 1,000 lifetimes, and somehow a child with a fraction of that data still understands the world more deeply. Why? That's the question Ilya thinks matters most.
These models somehow just generalize dramatically worse than people.
Yes.
And it's super obvious. That seems like a very fundamental thing.
Okay. So this is the crux, generalization. And there's two sub-questions. There's one which is about sample efficiency, which is why should it take so much more data for these models to learn than humans? There's a second about, even separate from the amount of data it takes, there's a question of why is it so hard to teach the thing we want to a model than to a human, which is to say, to a human, that we don't necessarily need a verifiable reward to be able to. You're probably mentoring a bunch of researchers right now, and you're, talking with them, you're showing them your code, and you're showing them how you think, and from that, they're picking up your way of thinking and how they should do research. You don't have to set like a verifiable reward for them that's like, okay, this is the next part of their curriculum, and now this is the next part of your curriculum, and oh, it was this training was unstable, and there's not this schleppy bespoke process. So perhaps these two issues are actually related in some way, but I'd be curious to explore this second thing, which feels more like continual learning, and this first thing, which feels just like sample efficiency.
Yeah. So, you could actually wonder, one possible explanation for the human sample efficiency that needs to be considered is evolution. And evolution has given us a small amount of the most useful information possible. And for things like vision, hearing, and locomotion, I think there's a pretty strong case that evolution actually has given us a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, human dexterity far exceeds, robots can become dexterous too if you subject them to like a huge amount of training and simulation. But to train a robot in the real world to quickly like pick up a new skill like a person does seems very out of reach.
Yeah.
And here you could say, oh yeah, like locomotion, all our ancestors needed great locomotion, squirrels, so locomotion maybe like we've got like some unbelievable prior.
Yeah.
You could make the same case for vision. I believe Jan LeCun made the point, children learn to drive after like 10 hours of practice, which is true. But our vision is so good. At least for me, when I remember myself being 5-year-old, I was very excited about cars back then. And I'm pretty sure my car recognition was more than adequate for self-driving already as a 5-year-old. You don't get to see that much data as a 5-year-old. You spend most of your time in your parents' house. So you have very low data diversity. Yeah. But you could say maybe that's evolution too. But in language and math and coding, probably not.
It still seems better than models. Obviously models are better than the average human at language and math and coding, but are they better at the average human at learning?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What I meant to say is that language, math, and coding, and especially math and coding, suggests that whatever it is that makes people good at learning is probably not so much a complicated prior, but something more, some fundamental thing.
So humans generalize better. We learn faster. We're more robust. And Ilya admits he has ideas about why, but won't share them publicly. What he will share is something just as provocative. His vision for what superintelligence actually looks like. And it's not the AGI that most people imagine, not some omniscient system that drops fully formed from the cloud. Ilya's version is stranger, more human. and it changes how you should think about what's coming next.
The term AGI. Why does this term exist? It's a very particular term. Why does it exist? There's a reason. The reason that the term AGI exists is, in my opinion, not so much because it's like a very important, essential descriptor of some end state of intelligence, but because it is a reaction to a different term that existed, and the term is narrow AI. If you go back to ancient history of game playing AI, of checkers AI, chess AI, computer games AI, everyone would say, look at this narrow intelligence. Sure, the chess AI can beat Kasparov, but it can't do anything else. It is so narrow, artificial narrow intelligence. So in response, as a reaction to this, some people said, well, this is not good. It is so narrow. What we need is general AI. General AI, an AI that can just do all the things. The second, and that term just got a lot of traction.
Yeah.
The second thing that got a lot of traction is pre-training. Specifically, the recipe of pre-training. I think the way people do RL now is maybe is undoing the conceptual imprint of pre-training. But pre-training had the property. You do more pre-training, and the model gets better at everything, more or less uniformly.
Yeah.
General AI. Pre-training gives AGI. But the thing that happened with AGI and pre-training is that in some sense they overshot the target. Because if you think about the term AGI, you will realize, and especially in the context of pre-training, you will realize that a human being is not an AGI. Because a human being, yes, there is definitely a foundation of skills. A human being lacks a huge amount of knowledge. Instead, we rely on continual learning. And so then when you think about, okay, so let's suppose that we achieve success and we produce some kind of safe superintelligence. The question is, but how do you define it? Where on the curve of continual learning is it going to be? I produce like a super intelligent 15-year-old that's very eager to go, and you say, okay, they don't know very much at all. The great student, very eager. You go and be a programmer. You go and be a doctor. Go and learn. So you could imagine that the deployment itself will involve some kind of a learning trial and error period. It's a process, as opposed to you drop the finished thing.
A super intelligent 15-year-old, eager to learn, deployed into the world. That's Ilya's vision. Not a finished product, but a process. Not artificial general intelligence, but something that grows through experience, just like we do. Whether SSI or someone else builds it first, the race is on. And the man who helped create the current paradigm is betting it won't be enough. Subscribe if you want to keep tracking where this actually goes.